Good evening, everybody. Somebody make sure Charity's phone is silenced for us. Yeah, good deal. All right. So in the Sunday morning class we've been having back here for the college age group, we did 1 Corinthians the last quarter of 21, which still is weird to say that we're in 2022. It kind of feels like the future, but 2022 is here. So the last few months of 21, we did 1 Corinthians, and Jake and I were doing that class together with that group. Really enjoyed it, and I'll say that after the first time I had been a part of that class, I don't know if it's been going a year or 9 months now, but somewhere in that ballpark, whenever we started, I told Clint, go ahead and keep signing me up for that one until the kids, they're not kids, I'm sorry. I was trying to make sure I didn't call Cam a kid this whole time, and there I did it right off the bat. These college-age individuals that are old enough to be running businesses and doing everything else, again, I'm sorry. As long as they would have me, I'd keep doing it. I didn't want to bug them and bore them and wear them out with the same stuff every week, but as long as they'd have me, I'd keep doing it. I really enjoyed that. So now y'all know you got the power to get rid of me whenever, I guess. But the reason I bring that up is I'm going to be looking at 1 Corinthians tonight. And I'd be, if it was a Wednesday night, only looking at chapter 12, because I think that one really has some of the most impact on me that any of them could. Everybody knows chapter 13 is the chapter that gets quoted at the weddings all the time, the book of love, the chapter of love, whatever. 12 would be the one where you're really looking at what you can do to strengthen the body of Christ. Everybody can do something. But with this being a Sunday night and having a couple extra minutes, I'm going to look at a few other chapters out of that book. And to somebody that says you don't have enough time to do an entire book on a Sunday night, or a chapter on a Sunday, no, I said it right the first time, a book on Sunday night, you're absolutely right. So I'd encourage anybody to go out there and read that when we get done and continue looking at it, because there's a lot of good stuff in that. Church at Corinth was an important one for a church like us, because they're a lot like us in a lot of ways in terms of they had people from all different backgrounds and belief systems. So whereas we don't know who's going to walk in those doors on any given church service, it could be anybody, and even right now, I don't know hardly anybody's backstory on what got you to this point in your life. At that church, they had Gentiles that were converts. I'm sure they had Gentiles that were not yet converts. They were just exploring something new. They had Jews. They had slaves. They had people of nobility. We read later that actually a city treasurer was one of them that Paul was writing back and forth with, Paul being the author of 1 Corinthians. And we're blessed to have a couple of books that were a couple of letters he wrote to them. I'm sure there was more transmissions back and forth, dialogue and all, but as part of our Bible, we get to see what he had to say to a young church that had a lot of problems. And a lot of times they thought they had a solution, and he had to change their course and say, no, what y'all are doing needs to stop right now. And he did. He spoke in very blunt terms like that, made sure that if they needed corrected, they got that from him, because they were looking to him for leadership. They were a young group of Christians. I won't read the entire section of verses I may be talking about, so I probably won't call out the chapter and verse numbers as we go through this, but I'll read segments of it and give a couple of thoughts on different places here. Starting out chapter 1, a few verses in, he's quick to say who he is and what the church is meant to be. This is not Paul's church. As he says, this is not Apollos' church. This is not the most important person in that congregation's church. It's not the oldest person or the youngest person or the person with the loudest voice. This is God's church. He says that right off the bat. And if it's important enough for him to lead off his series of 2 letters that we're able to read, it must be important. He continues on. And actually in chapter 3, I'll skip down there for just a moment, verses 3 and 4, he says, "You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? When one says, I follow Paul, and another says, I follow Apollos, are you not being mere humans?" there again, he's, for the second time in a short section here, he's saying, don't follow Paul. I may be the one that's giving you a few lessons along the way. I may be the one that you look to for some leadership. Ask me all the questions. I'll be coming to visit. This is not my church. This is for you to follow Jesus Christ, follow God through Jesus Christ. That's what he's making sure they understand explicitly, because it would be easy for somebody that's new to this church to look around and say, okay, Jesus kicked it off, right? And then he died, and we understand he was resurrected, although in Corinthians there is some conversation about the resurrection and what that means, and they had some questions about that in that congregation, in that church group, but disregarding that aspect of it, it'd be easy for them to say, well, who's next? Who's the next prophet? They were probably thinking some of that, and that's part of the reason he's sure to say, this is not Paul's church. You are not disciples of Paul. You're disciples of Jesus Christ. He says that over and over through this. Going back into chapter 1 and some of chapter 2, he speaks again, and this is where it really feels like if you interpret this wrong, it could be a slap in the face to people like me and you, to people that were reading this at that time. But he says, again, this goes into why it's important that a church like that and a church like this separates societal expectations from the church expectation. He says, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. There's that slap in the face, you know. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. Skipping down to chapter 2. I came to you in weakness with great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not wise with persuasive words, but a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but God's power. Again, he's saying what he's been saying all along, which was, you are people meant to follow Christ. We don't care that you're the guy that the city looks to for the answers. We don't care that the mayor, the governor, the whoever important in today's society cares what you have to say, because all that goes out the window when you enter into God's church. It doesn't matter that you're the person that doesn't get listened to on a day-to-day basis, that you get to sweep the floors and clean the toilets. That doesn't matter here. He's making sure they understand that, because like I said, there were slaves and there were nobility in this congregation that was meeting at Corinth. Same here. We may not have slaves here, and we may not have somebody that is of noble, rich bloodlines, whatever, but by the same token, society will continue and will always continue no matter what we try to do. Society will have people that they are placed up higher and placed down lower. And those people are just as welcome in God's church as anybody else. He's making sure they understand that, and by that same token, God is making sure we understand that. I'm going to skip down quite a bit more now to chapter 8. And this is something where it starts in verse 10 for anybody that is flipping there. This is where he's going to probably answer something that was asked of him. As we understand, this back and forth dialogue he had is an ongoing thing. So they would ask questions, and some of the time he may respond to that directly in this type letter. So he writes in 10 through 13, for someone with a weak conscience, with all your knowledge, eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be vegetarian, or else Zach wouldn't be allowed in here tonight, right? So, what does it mean? It means that, in my opinion, everything I say up here, other than what I read directly out of the Bible, is just an opinion. I want y'all to verify it before you go act on it. But he's saying that idol is a thing that somebody created. It has no religious significance whatsoever. If you've got an idol that you think is to Baal or whoever at that time, it means nothing to Jesus. It is not a competitor. Everybody talks about in politics, when will a third party rise up? That would be a competitor to the two-party system. There is no competitor to Jesus and God. Heaven is alone at the top of that. There is no second place. If you're a Christian and you think there is a second place, you're wrong. But that doesn't mean that you should deny what somebody else is going through in their walk to this point. I think that's what he's trying to get at here. Your knowledge, as he says here, your knowledge, that doesn't mean your opinion. Your knowledge that idol is meaningless, insignificant. You got to think about the people that were here. They may have been Gentile converts that had last year, the year before, their parents and grandparents had been sacrificing to idols and thinking they were doing something holy. And with that in mind, there's going to be people that struggle with that. So if they see a member of the church eating something that was sacrificed to idols, how is that not going to conflict their conscience? It will, because they've seen that carried out time and time again in a religious environment. So what he's saying, and me being the redneck I am, or at least I hope to be, I think about it a little bit different way. What if somebody said, I don't shoot anything, or I don't eat anything that was shot with a 270 or a 308. I only eat stuff that was shot with archery. Well, if that means that somebody is going to struggle to follow Jesus because of that, guess what? I'm not going to eat a deer that was shot with that rifle caliber. It's not going to happen, because if what he's saying is true and we assume it is, it's in the Bible, that's part of what we're saying here. How can we go along with something that's going to keep somebody else from being able to worship properly? Now, that's a silly analogy that I just drew, and I recognize that. I'm trying to make it a silly analogy to show the greater context of there are so many things that we may be doing on any given Sunday, any given Wednesday, any given Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday. I think I left one out there. Any of those days of the week that we do something, whether it's a holiday, whether it's just some regular work day. Maybe it's the way that somebody, as we go on to see here, does the Lord's Supper. Any of these things that we do that causes conflict within somebody's religious experience with God, if we keep them away, we're doing it wrong, and we need to put our preferences aside to allow for God to be the one that leads supreme. I wish I had more answers on that. All I have is what I'm reading here and thinking, I don't want to be the reason that somebody else loses out on their walk to heaven. Continuing on, I'll pose a question before we jump into that, which is, what is freedom? What does freedom mean? Well, I've read a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. It's by a Navy SEAL. And if I'm going to read a self-help book, it's going to be by somebody that has done something. It's not going to be somebody that's famous for writing self-help books. Somebody that I can actually respect. Somebody that has done something with their life that makes them have a valid opinion that can influence me in some way. And Jocko Willink is the guy's name. I don't know what his religious standpoint is, and I don't really care because I wasn't reading for that perspective. Discipline Equals Freedom was in terms of if you're able to control your desires, you can control a whole lot more of your life, which is going to give you freedom over your life. Well, what do you know? Paul actually says something along those lines here. He says in chapter 19, though I am free, I belong to no one. I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. And he goes on to list off a few there. He talks about Jews, people under the law, people that are weak, and people that are strong. He does all this. He becomes like them so that he can do this for the sake of the gospel and may share in the blessings. The next section heading I have is called the need for self-discipline. And in that, verse 24 says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. So combining those last two thoughts that we have, which is he becomes like those that are weak, he becomes like those that are the Jews, those are the ones that are under the law. He becomes like them, and then he strives with a purpose. He's shooting for something. He's not walking aimlessly, as he says there. He's not training aimlessly. These are diminishing skills. Stephen, if you quit studying right now, I think you've studied a lot in your life. When you speak, and I know some of the time you say, I'll quit talking now, whatever, you'll say that at the end of, I like hearing you talk because I like having somebody that has studied have something to add to a discussion. I appreciate that. But if you quit studying today, a year from now and 5 years from now, you're going to know less. That's just the way it goes. It's diminishing skill. If you are a missionary, and I don't mean missionary in the sense of overseas, because all of us are probably going to go home in the same area code. We live around each other. That's the reason we're here tonight. If we're a missionary in our workplaces, around the people that we come in contact with, that's what I'm referring to when I say missionary in this context. If we quit doing that, we're going to diminish that skill of being able to speak to somebody, being able to find somebody that needs to hear Christ. We're going to lose the ability to walk up to somebody and seamlessly weave Christ into conversation. That's a diminishing skill. We have to train with purpose and with some humility. Like as he said just a second ago, he is free and belongs to no one, but he makes himself like those others so that he can. That doesn't mean he gets down, because later in the book he says that bad company corrupts good character. Do not pick up the bad character aspects of who you're coming in contact with, but find that common ground with them, become like them in some way, not a fictitious way, something that you are actually embodying. Learn what it is that makes them tick and introduce Christ to them. Walk that walk with them. This is not a one and done thing. You have to follow through with that diminishing skill thing again. Now I'll finish with chapter 12, which is what I said was what I wanted to talk about the most, and I'm almost out of the time I was planning on talking. So again, go home and read that and find something to say. But verse 4 says there are different kinds of gifts, but the Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work. Okay, so in class, that Sunday morning class we're talking about, we spent a lot of time talking about gifts. What do gifts mean? Is that the ability to speak in tongues? Is that the ability to heal? Is that we talked about all that. And I've skipped over a lot of stuff that we also talked about in that class tonight because, I'm not the person you want to hear it from. There's a lot of deep topics here that, to be honest, I'm not the most well-versed in. I'm not going to be the one to deliver that message and corrupt whatever knowledge that you already have on that or lead you down a path. But in class, we talked a lot about that because I wanted to hear what Jake had to say. I wanted to hear what everybody in the class had to say. There's 7 or 8 or 10 on any given Sunday. I wanted to hear what they had to say as much as more than what I had to say. I already know what I think, and I know I'm coming up short. So again, if you take that and spin it a little bit, it looks like chapter 12. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. Out of that group that meets here and goes to that Sunday morning class that I'm part of, there's a lot of different skills. And I made the mistake in that class when we talked about this chapter. I said, I was looking around the room and I said something like, I know I'm thinking of something that each one of y'all would succeed at in this church, in the congregation. Something that you're good at. I can just imagine different things. And of course, as soon as I said that, London, I think she's probably watching at home, she called me out on it, and she wanted to know what I thought about everybody. What job did I give everybody? Well, I didn't want to be put on the spot like that, and I gave a couple answers, and I thought I was going to be done. Then the next thing I know, Aiden's egging her on. Hey, well, what about so-and-so? What is their gift? It's like, come on, guys, give me a break here. But at the same time, I'm not going to make that mistake tonight, but I can look around this room and see all the different skills, all the different abilities, all the different things that makes you comfortable. Just like I said, I enjoy that Sunday morning class. There's a benefit I get from it. And if you find something that you enjoy, you're going to be a lot more involved. You're going to be a lot more, you're going to have greater endeavors in that. You don't want somebody that's the biggest introvert being the door greeter. But guess what? There's a job for that person. And it's something that can influence somebody else to learn Christ. You don't want me leading singing. That's why Joe does that. But at the same time, there's stuff that Joe doesn't want to do that maybe I will. All that to say, chapter 12, it talks about the ways that you, every one of you, can lead somebody to Christ, be a part of the church. I don't mean the Church of Liberty. I mean the Church of God. Find a way to plug in and grow that, because honestly, we don't want it to be one of those things that diminishes over time. We can't let our numbers here or our quality here, because both of those go down when people are not involved, fall apart and diminish over time, because there's too many outside problems, I'll just say that are always trying to attack and take us down. The devil is at work, and I believe that he looks at a church like this, and he wants to find the weak point, and he wants to get in, he wants to take us down. The stronger we are, the better we hold together, the more that we embody this chapter 12, which another heading I have in there is unity and diversity in the body. Just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form a body, so it is with Christ. That body, it goes on to say, a foot is pretty important, an eye is pretty important, but if you have a body that's nothing but feet or nothing but eyes, it's not much of a body, is it? You got to have all the parts that make the whole. And because of that, this is where we step in and we fulfill those parts. Now, I'll go ahead and wrap up what I was saying here tonight and give you that, I guess, call out there to go and find something to plug in with in this new year. We've got a new year, new goals, all that stuff. This is something that's going to last a lot longer than 1 year. This is a lifetime effort. Things that people around us are already succeeding at and you're already succeeding at, go ahead and exceed your expectations. Find a way to plug in and be that part of the body of Christ. Now, if there's anybody that out here tonight is looking for the next step, if you're not a baptized believer in Christ yet, now is the time to do that. If you have that calling tonight, if you think tonight is the night I'm getting baptized, I'm not waiting one more day, let it be known as together we stand and sing.